Welcome back to the show as we preview Election Day. We are with Glenn Conway, Joe Scott and Chris Hutching. Has the media been fair in its coverage, particularly with respect to the mayoralty and this field of, 14 candidates? Chances are the average viewer to this show would not be able to name any more than 3 of them, maybe 4 on a good day. Is it our fault?
Well, Mike, apart from your own fine shows...
Thank you very much, Chris.
I think the media has fallen down quite a lot locally. I can say this because I'm employed by media who tend to be outside of Christchurch. But I don't think a lot of people have any idea who the other candidates are. I also think that the local media was so easily manipulated. I went along to a couple of press conferences that Bob Parker had, and frankly they were trivial, and yet he snapped his fingers and the media people rolled along there with their cameras, and there we were, another photo opportunity. That business about the architect Athfield being appointed was a prime example. It was not a front page story, it was something that should have been buried about 3 or 5. And yet, you know, this is another example of his mastery, I think, in setting up a red herring that everybody runs off and discusses. It has no relevance whatsoever. It's a talk festival until such time as a property owner comes along with a developer and a banker and lodges a resource consent application. And then we can start talking seriously about that kind of thing.
All right. Coming back to the wider field of the mayoral candidates, take it from the press perspective. How tricky was it? How much consideration did you guys give to how do we reflect the field?
Well, to a certain extent, we left it up to the candidates to approach us in some ways. Jim and Bob have been very proactive, obviously. There's 2 or 3 other candidates that have been in regular contact with us. Our view was, though, if they were to come out with a statement of any kind, it was to be judged on merit. Brad Maxwell was a classic, I think. He came out with 2 or 3 stories that we ran because we viewed them to be credible statements. The rest of the field, apart from Peter Wakeman and Blair Anderson lately, haven't heard from them. So I'm not saying that it was all their responsibility to get coverage, but if they're not going to approach the media, supply the media with statements and comments, they're running for mayor of this large city, then quite frankly, why are they bothering?
But Glenn, there were 1 or 2 people that did approach you, I know, who were turned down, and they said to me, rightly or wrongly, that they were told it was politicking. And I thought, yes, we're in the middle of an election. Shouldn't we be covering people who are politicking? So, you know, I think there were 1 or 2 opportunities missed there.
It came down to credibility of what they were saying. I mean, I've got no bias against any of the candidates. If they come up with some credible statements, they would have got some column centimetres, and in our view, they didn't.
See, I know that at Newstalk ZB, one problem that I've had to grapple with is that, take the likes of Blair Anderson and Peter Wakeman, who have contested the mayoralty and the general election in the case of Blair Anderson in previous years. There is no form. They've got no positive track record of being able to garner a substantial following. Should that sway a media's judgment as to, well, how much attention do they deserve?
No, in an ideal world we'd be fair and we'd give every candidate an equal opportunity, but the reality is it's not a fair world. And the reality is particularly with this campaign, things were so focused on the earthquake and the coverage focused on the earthquake that, of course, Bob was the focus. And I don't agree that it's up to candidates to approach the media. In an ideal world, we would have taken more time to find out what each candidate stood for and their policies. And, you know, in the past on ZB, we've run packages on individual candidates. That just wasn't possible this time. There's only so much time on radio, there's only so many column centimetres in the press. And unfortunately, the earthquake swallowed a lot of that.
We had pretty extensive plans to give all the candidates some space and a platform. And like Joe said, September 4 just changed everything.
Yes, but Glenn, I do feel that, you know, while you used your discretion about some of the candidates, I don't think there was discretion used about a lot of the stuff that Bob was saying. Many of those things that Bob fronted were not significant, but they all gave him an opportunity for a photo op. And you look at all your community newspapers, they're full of the guy. I mean, there's literally hundreds of photographs of Bob Parker in his black jacket. I mean, anybody else that gets near him, well, they've done a fantastic job.
I guess in some ways, though, that's the benefits of being the incumbent to a certain extent. You are right, he has milked it and we've helped him milk it.
Well, we shouldn't have, don't you think? Don't you think we could have been a little harsher about our judgments as to what we were going to cover of him?
Definitely, though. But what was difficult in those days was that I remember the Ian Athfield media conference that you referred to earlier. In those days, there were daily updates on the council with what was happening with the earthquake, and they were things that the media had to go to. I remember sending a reporter to that Ian Athfield one. She came back into the newsroom, rolled her eyes and went, "Oh my God, we're falling for it. We're falling for it." But the problem we had is that you'd ring somebody beforehand and say, "What's that media conference about?" And they wouldn't blooming tell you. So you had to go. Though we did strategically make decisions about the coverage once they got back, and that story didn't rate very highly for us at all.
Prediction time on the mayoralty. We'll have a look at the City Council wards after the break. First of all, do you think it will be a cliffhanger or a cakewalk for one of the candidates?
Well, I think it's going to be really close because the voting percentage is up to 47 yesterday, which proves that some people are being motivated. For what reason, we're not too sure. And I would say generally that tends to favour the underdog, I think.
All right. Jo?
I agree. Absolute cliffhanger. I mean, the high voter turnout's remarkable. Team Bob rings it one way, Team Jim another, and I'm not going to call it. It'll be down to the wire.
If it is a cliffhanger, it will prove that the last batch of polls were wrong.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Which is a big call to make. Do you think it will be a cliffhanger?
Yeah, I do.
Really?
I can't call it. I wouldn't want to call it.
And also, a lot of votes have come in since the release of that last poll. So that could be read by Team Jim being alarmed and crikey Dick, Bob's going to do it, or it could be the other way round.
And the difference between Jim and Bob's campaign, well, Bob's campaign doesn't exist anymore, is that Jim has serious people. He's got numbers on the ground. They have a clear idea of what they want to do in the last few weeks of the campaign, and that is to mobilise thousands and thousands of voters. They're hitting those people, and so I read into the voter turnout that if it's going to benefit either candidate, it will benefit Jim more than Bob, I believe.
And they seem to be quietly confident that their ground war is working, don't they?
I think so.
Yeah. We'll take a break. Coming up very shortly, we may look at the extraordinary voter participation in this election and also the City Council wards. What are our panelist picks for the victors and the vanquished tomorrow? That's coming up.